Hey, what's up, everybody? I want to welcome you to another episode of the Dreamerspro Daily Recap, where we give you a recap of all of the hot topics that we covered that day. You can catch them in their long format and also catch it fully streaming for free on Apple Podcasts. ESPN has been doing some cord cutting over the last 2 years. The most recent, well, before this news, but the most recent big name staff that they let go of was RG3. They let go of him, and he made a joke about it, how you get fired on the weekend. They got rid of him, but prior to that, they had gotten rid of some pretty high-profile names. You're talking about people like Jalen Rose, Keyshawn Johnson, Max Kellerman, Mark Jackson, Jeff Van Gundy, just to list a few. And at the time, those names made a lot of headlines. And as people were reacting to it, some people that were working within ESPN, like Stephen A. Smith, said that these things happen and there will be more cord cutting taking place in the future. Now, here's what's interesting about the person that just got let go of. I don't know, I can't speak today. We had actually produced a show about him just about 2 days ago. Just literally 2 days ago, when he was interviewing Lakers head coach JJ Redick. Who are we referring to? Zach Lowe, right? We just did a show about an interview that took place on the Low Post podcast on ESPN by Zach Lowe. And it turns out that ESPN just got rid of Zach Lowe, and the reason that they're citing for doing so was essentially because of his salary. And this is all over the internet, but today we want to read from market.com. So let's get into what this article had to say here. It says, why Zach Lowe's $1 million contract led to his exit from ESPN. Zach Lowe is a well-known figure in the basketball world, celebrated for his sharp analysis and insightful commentary on the NBA. As a senior writer for ESPN, he built a reputation over time, over his more than 10 years with the network, having first joined Bill Simmons' Grantland in 2012. Lowe's journey through the world of sports journalism has been marked by his keen understanding of the game, as well as his ability to break down complex strategies in a way that fans can appreciate. He's also hosted the popular Low Post podcast and frequently appeared on NBA Today, making him a familiar face to basketball enthusiasts everywhere. And it says here from the Athletic News, ESPN parted ways with NBA senior writer Zach Lowe as a part of the network's continuing layoffs, sources tell Andrew Marchand. Lowe's salary, which was over seven figures annually, was the biggest factor in ESPN's decision. Unfortunately, the latest buzz in sports media reveals that Lowe is no longer with ESPN. According to Andrew Marchand from The Athletic, Lowe's dismissal was part of a wave of layoffs that has recently hit the network, which also saw notable departures like Robert Griffin III and Samantha Ponder just before the football season kicked off. Reports suggest that Lowe's salary, over $1 million a year, was a significant factor in the decision to let him go. One insider noted his salary was the biggest factor in the dismissal from ESPN, highlighting the tough choices networks face in today's changing media landscape. And then some other news outlets decided to react to this story as well. What are my thoughts on this? Okay, what are my thoughts on this? First of all, people out there like Stephen A. Smith have warned that things like this are going to happen, right? So he's kind of put that in the air. But then you have the other aspect of this, which is, as you guys know, ESPN did give Pat McAfee $85 million. ESPN did just sign Shannon Sharpe. We're hearing stories of ESPN potentially giving Stephen A. Smith $25 million per annum. So it's not like as if ESPN doesn't have resources. They have resources. It seems like what they're doing is they're consolidating all of their resources towards a few key big name figures at the network. That seems to be the case, because if you're telling me that they're getting rid of Zach Lowe for $1 million, but then you have a budget to give Stephen A. Smith $25 million. Obviously, there are different shows and all of that. I understand that their various shows make various amounts of income, and I get all of that. But nevertheless, we're talking about it's still the same company. It just goes to show you that they're pretty much trying to invest all their money in the big talent that they have. Essentially, that's what it seems like to me. That's the first part. The second part, and I got to discuss this. I was surprised to hear the amount of money Zach Lowe was making a year. I actually thought he would be making more, if I'm being honest with you guys. I just believed that he'd be making more money. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just my naivety. Maybe I didn't know anything about the industry. I guess when you see people on TV, you just assume that they're making, millions and millions and millions and now some people do make millions of dollars, don't get it twisted, but there are other people at ESPN that it would seem that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars. When people think about, I want to work on TV, you think you want to make it big, you want to be famous, you want to be, as they say, rich and famous. I don't know. I assumed that they would be earning more. Now, here's the other side to this. And as I'm thinking about this, I don't know why I'm thinking about Marcellus Wiley, but here's the other side to this. Now that figures like Zach Lowe are no longer working at ESPN, we now have to look, okay, what happens next? We have to ponder what happens next. And usually in a case like this, if you don't have a platform outside of what you were doing on television, it's going to be pretty difficult because now you're going to be trying to knock on other doors. But when you have people like the Marcellus Wileys and others who spent time building out their own thing in the independent space, you can now just kind of go into your own groove and do your own thing, right? And there are people out there making $1 million and more doing it independently, right? But it really shows you how the sports media landscape is really, really changing, right? And a lot of people are beginning to now, hedge their bets. Stephen A. Smith is another one, right? He saw the writing on the wall and he started his own Stephen A. Smith show, which is successful. Caitlin Clark has taken the sports world by storm. I can't remember a time prior to this current moment in time that we have discussed the WNBA like we're doing right now. We just didn't. People didn't really care to the extent that they do now. And one of the biggest reasons for that is the Caitlin Clark effect. She's come into the WNBA. She's taken the league by storm. She put up fantastic numbers as a rookie. She won the Rookie of the Year. Her team made it into the playoffs with the Indiana Fever. Throughout the regular season, she had record numbers and attendance wherever she goes. They were breaking all kind of records. We did a show just the other day, and they were talking about the rematch between her and Angel Reese brought in more viewers than some NBA playoff games. It's crazy. Even ticket prices cost more to go see Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese than some NBA playoff, which is insane. And it shows you how far the WNBA has come in just basically one season. It seems like, obviously it's something that's been built up, that they've been building towards all these years with players before her that have built the infrastructure and all of that. But in terms of growth that has taken place within a 12-month time span, it's remarkable, to say the very least. That's the first part of it. Now there's the other part of this, which we all know, but maybe for those of you who don't know, there's also the racial aspect of this. There's the, Caitlin Clark is the white girl. You have people like that were supporting Angel Reese. She's the black girl. So listen, race is always a component. Whenever we're talking about the United States, race is always going to be there because it's woven into its history. So it's always going to be there, whether some people like it or not. It's just always going to be there. There's no way you can eliminate it because of the history of the United States. So there was that aspect. Now, when we were covering Caitlin Clark and Angel, we didn't really touch it from that aspect because it wasn't something that particularly interested me. But nevertheless, I was cognizant of the fact that these undertones existed. So what happened? Yesterday, it was the day before yet, but yesterday they were covering the news of Caitlin Clark's Indiana Fever, who got eliminated from the WNBA playoffs. Fantastic. But that wasn't the story. Her team getting eliminated wasn't the story. The story was what happened during and around the game. And it had to do with racism and racial slurs being hurled at the opposing teams. And one of the players from the teams, Alyssa Thomas, spoke to the media, and she was expressing her displeasure with some of the racial slurs that were hurled in her direction. And what we want to do now, we want to give you guys a quick summation of what was said, or essentially what she said in the backstory. And then we're going to continue on the show. Take a listen to what really took place here. Take a listen to this here.
Connecticut Sun forward Alyssa Thomas and Indiana Fever coach Christy Sides both called for the abusive comments toward W players to stop during their respective post-game news conferences following Game 2 on Wednesday night. Thomas went as far as to ask the league to step in to do something about the behavior.
In my 11-year career, I've never experienced the racial comments from the Indiana Fever fan base. We had her face on a serious matter that happened in this world, and it's unacceptable, honestly. And there's no place for it, and we've been professional throughout the whole entire thing, but I've never been called the things that I've been called on social media, and there's no place for it. And basketball is headed in a great direction, but nah, we don't want fans that are going to degrade us and call us racial names. I mean, we already see what's happening in the world and what we have to deal with in that aspect. And we come to play basketball for our job, and it's fun, but we don't want to go to work every day and have social media blown up over things like that. It's uncalled for, and something needs to be done, whether it's them checking their fans or this league checking. There's no time for it anymore.
Good for Elisa speaking up. Following those strong comments, the WNBA released the following statement. In part, it read, "While we welcome a growing fan base, the W will not tolerate racist, derogatory, or threatening comments made about players, teams, and anyone affiliated with the league." So obviously we discussed the progress, but still a long way to go.
So you heard what was said there. Now, I heard it a bit yesterday. I listened to it a bit, but I didn't really pay too much attention to it because other things were on my mind. But then I was going through the internet this morning, and I came across an article from awfulannouncing.com. And they were highlighting some comments that Nick Wright from Speak For Yourself, First Things First, some people are saying he's going to be the face of FS1. Some comments that Nick Wright was saying, and essentially what Nick Wright was saying was he was essentially saying that racism or racists basically ruined the event, and he was calling out the racist element within the WNBA as it pertains to Caitlin Clark. So what we want to do now is want to play exactly what Nick Wright had to say on this podcast, and then want to come back and really get into this thing here. Take a listen to what Nick Wright had to say there.
Arguably top 5 player in the league already, got the team to the playoffs, but none of that is the story. And none of that is the story for me right now, because this mediocre, unimpressive, grown woman decided she was going to wear this outfit looking like this to a basketball game. And if you can't see, it says ban nails. And she has long, fake nails on her fingers, mocking Dejanay Carrington. Dejanay Carrington, who plays for the Connecticut Sun, who was interrogated all week because when she swiped for the ball, she hit Caitlin Clark in the eye. Forget the fact that Caitlin knew it was unintentional. Everyone watching seemed to think it was unintentional. The goddamn internet decided maybe it was intentional, and it became the story. And if you sense anger in my voice, it's because it's there. Because race in this country is a rubber band, y'all. And when one side stretches, the other side gets a little more tense. And then when one side snaps back, the other side feels the reaction to it. And fortunately, by some miracle, our country's racial rubber band hasn't actually fully snapped in 160 years. But every time it's stretched and every time there's pressure on it, it's not quite the same. It's frayed a bit, it's distorted a bit, and it's a little bit weaker moving forward. And here is what has happened over what should have been the greatest season in women's professional basketball history. You got this boatload of new fans because Caitlin Clark is box office, right? And the rest of the rookie class is very impressive. Caitlin Clark is box office. But unfortunately, and inevitably, and the league should have seen this train coming down the tracks, on that bandwagon were folks that weren't fans of basketball, that weren't even actual fans of Caitlin Clark. They were fans of what they thought Caitlin could represent, which was the humbling of black women. And you got this cavalcade of open, unabashed racists who tried to put a hood of Caitlin Clark fandom on, and on social internet, and last night in person, tried their best to terrorize her opposition. And while I have said I think it'd be better for everyone not to read their social media feeds, that's easier said than done. And Dejanay got a damn email from somebody saying, basically, hope you die. And like I said, it's a rubber band. And so what happens when it gets as bad as it has gotten, and the other side gets tenser, then all of a sudden, you have folks who are seeing this happen, seeing this big tent now has a corner of the tent occupied by figurative torch-wielding racists, and they almost as a defense mechanism start to minimize the actual on-court impact of Caitlin Clark as like a protectionism. And then the folks that weren't the torch-wielding racists and were just enjoying the basketball, they see, well, hold on. There's a lot of women who cover this league, majority of which black women, seem to be downplaying or hating on or dismissing Caitlin. And then they get upset. And now everyone on the rubber band is, their hair is up, they're defensive, they're not actually able to give at all times their full, honest opinion of what they're seeing on the basketball court, because the goddamn racists ruined it for all of us. And that is a tale as old as time for so many things, multicultural events in this country that could be great, and the goddamn racists ruin it for us.
So you heard what Nick Wright had to say there, right? You saw the image that we put up with the fingernails, and I guess it's a slight at black girls who have long fingers. I don't know what the hell was going on there. But anyway, you heard what Nick Wright had to say. There's something I want to say about Nick Wright before we actually get into what he said. Nick Wright is obviously white. You can see this. But Nick Wright's kids are mixed. All right? They're mixed. His wife is actually black. So this issue hits Nick Wright differently. Why does it hit Nick Wright differently? Well, it's one thing when you're talking about things that you don't like, if you're talking about racial injustice or unfairness that exists in society, is one thing if you're talking about it from afar, whereas you're reacting to something that's happening to a particular group. You may not be within that group, but you're trying to sympathize with them. In the case of Nick Wright, this affects him directly because even though he is white, his wife is black, which means, and his wife is his family. So you can't separate yourself from your family. You understand what I'm saying? So you can't say, well, I'm black and she's white, so that ain't got nothing to do with me. No, it's your family. You guys are one unit. But more importantly, his kids are mixed. And I think his son does his show with him from time. If you look at his son, you can see some of Nick Wright's features. He's very fair. So it hits differently for Nick, right? Because now he can feel from the standpoint of his wife, but he can also feel from the standpoint of his kids. and it resonates at a deeper level, right? So I think it's important that we give the backdrop to what could be possibly informing Nick Wright's comments. But that's one part. I want to get to the other part. The other part is this, which is the racial element in all of this. Is there a racial element that plays a role in this? Well, of course. Now, some people may be saying, "Oh, well, you know, you're race baiting and all of this nonsense and all of that." I can't take you seriously when we get into these type of conversations. Why? Because look, the truth doesn't offend me. The truth doesn't hurt my feelings. The truth should have the freedom to be expressed by those who are willing to say it. There is a racial element in all of this. Why? Caitlin Clark is white. Angel Reese is black. So there's always going to be a racial element in this in the United States. Is racism and all of this stuff exists in other parts of the world? Of course it does. But in the United States, they have a very special history with it. We don't need to go through the history. It has always been there, right? So there's chances are there will always be some element in it. Am I saying that everybody is racist, meaning all black people hate white people and all? No, of course not. I'm not saying that. But there's always this element that exists in the United States. And I think that people like Nick Wright feel the need to call it out, right? He feels the need to call it out. And Nick Wright, speaking as a white man, it may be something that bothers him. Now, I think it's important that I say this as well. I don't think Nick Wright here is being woke. I haven't lived in the States for a very long time. I will be moving back very early next year, so I guess I'm going to get hip to the lingo and all of that again, but I figured out what woke means. It seems like the definition of woke has kind of evolved over time. I thought woke initially meant stay awake, be aware. And funny enough, I think I heard Nas mention the word woke in a song a while ago. I don't remember what song. Was it Nas? Yeah, I think it was Nas that first said it. I forgot. But anyway, so woke started as something based on my understanding is, you know, be aware. Be aware of what's going on around you, right? Speaking from a racial standpoint. But then woke seems to have now transformed into this other word, which now seems to mean if you're woke, it means that it seems like if you have, for instance, a leftist ideology, then you're woke. Or if you say this, then you're woke. And if you say that, and I'm like, it now the definition of the word is beginning to become diluted. And I'm beginning to lose understanding of what the word means. And now woke seems to be a term that's thrown out there when it's like, it's a term you throw out when you want to tell somebody to shut up. Like, oh, you're woke. And I'm like, what are we doing? Right? Like, what are we doing? Because now it's a form of censorship. That's what it is in some cases. Oh, don't say that you're being woke. It's like, allow me to speak. Allow me to speak. If you disagree with me, disagree with me. But don't try to shut me up and say, oh, you can't. No. Now, I said in other shows that, look, I'm in the center, right? I'm in the center of things, leaning right, center right, not far right, but center right. But I also said I do agree. I can understand views from various standpoints. Now, me saying that I understand where Nick Wright is coming from this situation. If that means I'm woke, then you can go ahead and kiss my ass. I think for myself. Nobody defines how I think about things. Nobody on earth. I have the right to interpret things as I see them, and I don't have to feel the need to, hold on to any particular school of thought. As you guys know, I've never really covered this story from a racial aspect, but Nick Wright said something that made me think. So the question to the audience is the following, and it's very simple. Do you think that there's a racial element in all of this between Caitlin Clark and her supporters? Because Nick is saying that some racists are supporting her and they're using her as a guise to now hide their racism, hide behind it, and then go out there and throw out racial insults at people? Or do you think that no, there's no such thing like that? There's no way that this could be a possibility. I'm going to leave it up to the audience to come down to your own conclusions. To me, however, I do understand what Nick Wright is saying, and I always think there's a component of it in the United States. Does it mean that that it happens every single second? No, but is there an element of it? Of course there is. Let's not be stupid. All right, let's not be stupid. It's like somebody, for instance, it's like somebody in a country that lives where tribalism is a real thing. Where tribalism is a thing, like in Nigeria, in certain countries around, tribalism is a thing. I'm with this group, I'm with that group, and then somebody says, "Oh no, tribalism doesn't exist." Like, bro, go sit down. Like, shut up and sit down, please. Stop. Like, stop.